introduction. All that's left to say at this point is that this is joint work with the University of the Ruhr University Bochum, the VU Amsterdam, and the University of Cyprus. All right, I'm going to spoil you a bit at the beginning of the talk. We will present Marks, our tool to extract class hierarchies and from legacy binaries. And obviously, this uses the static analysis of C++ programs. And finally, we will use our results to actually implement security-related use cases, such as CFI or type-safe object reuse. To motivate our work, we see that analyzing C++ applications statically is pretty hard due to the inherent use of runtime features in C++ applications. So, for example, we get object that may be allocated on the heap, and later on, if you want to dispatch a virtual function of the object, we may end up in the indirect function call. So this is a problem because we cannot statically build a full CFG of the application, because we don't know where the indirect function call will actually end up. So if we had a full CFG, well, first off, if we had information about the classes that are present in the C++ application, we would have a higher level view over the application in itself, and also considering the class hierarchy, which depicts the relation between the different classes. So this would ease the reverse engineering process in general. Also, if we had a full CFG also across indirect function calls, we would be able to build better exploit mitigations. So, for example, Schuster et al. Showed counterfeit object-oriented programming, which actually makes explicit use of C++ semantics to conduct a code reuse attack. So if we had the full CFG, we could get a finer-grained control over the forward edge at indirect function call sites. We will keep in the area of exploitation for now a bit, and just revisit how an attacker goes about getting control over an indirect function call. So take the code on the left side. So we got some application that allocates an object of type A. So on the right side, we see how it looks like on a higher level. So we got the object with a vtable pointer, which basically points to a specific class. So in this case, it points to a table of functions. And yeah, these functions basically list. So these function lists basically describes the functions that may be allowed to be dispatched at an indirect function call for objects of this type. So object A is also part of a bigger class hierarchy. So it's basically the green class hierarchy you see on the right. At some point, an attacker might use a memory corruption error to basically overwrite the specific metadata of the object. So in this case, you will overwrite the vtable function pointer and basically inject a new class into the application, so the red one shown below. If we now end up at an indirect function call site for this object, the indirect function call site will basically use the attacker-injected class hierarchy depicted in red and give the attacker full control over the indirect function call, and let them divert control flow to a location of his choice. The defense at this point is pretty simple and conceptually, because we still allow an attacker to modify the constructed object. We won't interfere with that process at all. However, we will precede every indirect function call site with code to actually check whether the object is still of the correct type. So in this case, the indirect function call site expects a hierarchy of the clean of the green class hierarchy. However, the attacker now made the object be part of another class hierarchy, the red one, and then actually this check fails. So the class hierarchy that expected is the green one, but the modified object is part of the red class hierarchy, so the injected vtable by the attacker. So control flow integrity would at this point just simply board the application and just prevent the attacker from controlling the indirect function call at this point. All right, onto our approach. So we basically see on the lower left function call, how it would be used in C++ applications. So just when writing out the source code, we got some object and calling a function of the object. Above you see how this actually looks like in the binary level code. So we got some object and the indirect function call I talked about earlier. And we do know that the object has to be part of some class, right? So this is what the compiler designed. There might be multiple classes in an application. So in this example, A, B, or C. And yeah, but and also these classes might be related in some kind of way. So B might derive from A and extend its implementation, whereas C is a wholly different class hierarchy. However, at the binary level, we do not really see the inheritance relationship. We don't have it readily available for us in any kind of metadata. Also, we do not really have the concept of classes at the binary level. We only got the vtables, which designate the functions that are expected in an indirect function call set for a specific object. So this is basically what we're left with when analyzing the application statically. So we got the indirect call site, and we know that there are vtables, but the link between them is missing. Now we developed Max to statically recover the class hierarchy of Linux x64 binaries following the Itanium ABI. And yeah, part of the output of Max will be a set of vtables, which are roughly equivalent to the hierarchy. So at this point, we ignore inheritance directions. And also, we will be able to tie a set of vtables to an indirect function call so that we know that the specific indirect function call will only accept this, this number of vtables. So the analysis basically follows 4 steps. So we first need to identify the vtables in the binary just to have an idea which classes are available. Then we will inspect their usages in the code itself so that we see how the vtables are related. Furthermore, we can then refine the results using some heuristics on the vtables themselves, and finally extend our analysis across multiple modules. Okay, starting with the vtable identification. So basically at runtime we have some object that's got a vtable pointer, so it's pointing into the vtable object you see on the right, but we cannot really look at the class, at the objects themselves, because that's a runtime artifact and we're analyzing things statically. So we're left with the vtables themselves. First, we note that the vtables lie in read-only memory in the application, so we can simply scan sections like row data to discover the vtables themselves and filter them for additional heuristics, which I will now explain. For one, we note that the only reference to the vtable from outside has to be for the first function entry. So basically in the code we will find some move immediate, which has this pointer as an operand, and so we shouldn't see any more reference to the vtable, else it wouldn't be a vtable candidate after all. Furthermore, each vtable is prependent by 2 metadata fields that have to be in a defined range or set to 0, so we can check for this as well. And finally, all function pointers in the vtable have to actually point to the code section or be relocation entries. So using these few simple heuristics, we can just simply scan the row data section to discover all possible vtable candidates. It isn't bad to overestimate the number of vtable candidates, because we won't see them in the later analysis step if we misjudged an entry. So looking at the vtable usages, consider a hierarchy as shown to the left. So we got class B deriving from class A, and on the right we will see code that basically initializes a new object of type B. So first, the new operator just allocates memory, which isn't initialized at all, but then it calls a designated function in the constructor of B, which will fill the object. As B derives from A, we will first have to construct the object of A to its fullest extent. So At this point, the constructor of A is run as if we were constructing an instance of A itself. So what A has to do is just writing the vtable pointer of A into the object, so that at an indirect function call side, it is clear which functions may be called on this specific object, because they are, the indirect call set dispatches through the vtable pointer. Now that we have fully initialized the object of A, the constructor of B can be further initialize the object to its liking. So it still has to write a new vtable pointer into the object. This is due to the fact that objects of type B might be allowed to call different functions at an indirect function call site, and thus a new set of function table, so a new function table has to be written into the object. And this is also the gist of our analysis. So we see that a different vtable pointer, the one of B, is written into the object. And yeah, if we observe such a pattern on a code path in the application, then we will know that both vtable pointers have to be related, because they're used in an inheritance relationship. So A is initialized first, which is the base class, and then the vtable pointer at the exact same spot in the object is overwritten by vtable pointer B, so we know their relation at this point. Further, the constructor of B may initialize other data members, but this is nothing we're interested in our analysis. Basically, we try to cover as much constructs of this kind as you have seen in the previous slide. So we statically build paths through the binary and try to build them in such a way that we get across many interesting locations. So for one, indirect function calls are interesting because if we know an object at this point, we can tie a class hierarchy to the indirect function call. Calls to new are important because they specify that, or there's a possibility that the subsequent code will initialize a new object. And also instructions operating on vtables are interesting because those might be constructors or destructors. What's also noteworthy is that if we were following along specific statically built paths through the binary, and we have already seen object construction at some point, we will now be able to resolve indirect function calls at the point of our analysis. Finally, we note that for our use cases, we empirically measured that it's enough to follow at most 2 calls into the call stack. So this already yielded good enough results to cover all kinds of inheritance relationships and just see them by analyzing the code path. So far, we've been concerned with analyzing the code itself to extract the relationships between the vtables, but we know that we can also inspect the vtables themselves. Again, we have a class B that derives from class A, and class A provides functions A1 and A2, and to the right we see the actual vtables for those 2 classes. In green are highlighted the elements influenced by the functions provided by class A, and in red are highlighted the elements influenced by class B. So that's just one entry in the second vtable. We see that class A provides A1 and A2, and class B actually decides to specialize the implementation of A1 as provided by its base class and provide a new function B1. So B has the possibility to call the functions A1, A2, and B1, whereas A1 is its own specialized implementation, B1 is its own implementation overall, and A2 is the one provided by its base class. If we now compare 2 vtables, or if we compare all vtables we know pairwise, we see that, for example, at offset 0, the analysis sees a wholly different function pointer. So considering that we only got the pointer and no other semantics at this point, we cannot really conclude anything about this situation. Those are different functions, and be it as it is, this doesn't help us in any way. However, if we look at the second entry in the vtable, we see the exact same function pointer at this point. So this makes us conclude that those two v-tables might be related in an inheritance relationship, because this is mostly the case if B actually reuses the implementation provided by its base class A. So this is a way where we can add further edges to the relationship graph of the v-tables we encountered so far. Finally, we have to note that typically applications consist of several modules. And if we analyze them independently, we get three different hierarchies for this example. But if we do not port our results across multiple modules, we will underestimate the hierarchy, because this is one big hierarchy and we would have otherwise ended up with three distinct hierarchies at this point. Okay, so far for our approach. We will now evaluate. We evaluated 5 applications, 3 of them shown here with varying numbers of class hierarchies, and we note that we exactly reconstructed at least 87% of the class hierarchy. The analysis time was reasonable. However, we note that MySQL Server is some kind of an outlier and spent most of its analysis time in a specific function for which path generation just took too long. However, for the 5 applications we had in the paper, on average, the analysis took about 48 minutes. Furthermore, we see that we overestimate some hierarchies, which isn't much of a problem. However, we do underestimate or do not find any hierarchies at all for some hierarchies in the applications. This is mostly due to the compiler simply omitting v-tables for abstract base classes, so we don't really have any chance to see the connecting v-table, and the hierarchy just falls into separate pieces, which makes us underestimate it. Finally, we use the results to harden legacy binaries. Specifically, we do control for integrity as presented in the introduction, which can be thought of in binary level VTV as implemented in GCC. And further, we implement type-safe object reuse, which is akin to a binary level cling. However, we do bucket by hierarchy only. For these approaches, we have to consider how precise our analysis has to be. And we see that for types of object reuse, imprecision in the analysis only leads to a lower security. So different objects or objects of different class hierarchies might just be put in the same bucket, but this only lowers security and has no further impact. However, for control for integrity, this might break applications. So if we have an indirect function call side for which we do not have a if we have an indirect function call side for which we do not have a class hierarchy, because we did not build a path for it or did not see its initialization, control for integrity might raise a violation, and we might abort the application even for benign code paths. So to counter this, we can enrich our static analysis results with dynamic analysis and simply use unit tests for code coverage. Or upon seeing a violation of CFI, we can fall back to a computationally intensive slow path so that we can verify the violation to see if it's due to the imprecision of our analysis or just a real violation due to an ongoing attack. For this, we deploy path armor. Finally, we conclude we got some limitations. The approach is evidently compiler dependent. As we have seen, if a compiler decides to emit abstract base classes, we will not see them in the code because there's no artifact. So there's no way for us to see them, and we will underestimate hierarchies. Furthermore, the analysis is static, so we got the problem of path explosion, just choosing the correct paths out of multiple possible. And we have to tolerate imprecision for the applications. Finally, we see that Mark succeeds in recovering the majority of class hierarchies for large and real-world applications with promising results. And we also can use the results to implement security-related use cases on a binary level only. And yeah, I would like to note that our implementation is open source and available under the following link. Thank you for your attention.